The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered general store, and Rose Parker gripped the seat beneath her with white knuckles, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scanned every shadow and doorway in Carson City, Nevada, searching for the face that haunted her nightmares. It was June 1878, and the dusty frontier town sprawled before her like a promise of freedom she desperately wanted to believe in, though the bruises hidden beneath her high-necked dress reminded her that Marcus had always been good at finding her. She had fled Chicago 3 weeks ago with nothing but a carpet bag, her grandmother's wedding ring sewn into the hem of her skirt, and the terrible knowledge that her former fiancé had sworn to kill her the night she finally broke off their engagement. The driver offered his hand, and Rose descended on trembling legs, her dark auburn hair already escaping its pins in the dry Nevada heat. She was 22 years old and utterly alone, 2,000 miles from everything she had ever known. The main street stretched before her, lined with false-fronted buildings that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sun, saloons, a bank, a modest hotel, and businesses she could not yet make out competed for space along the dusty thoroughfare. Cowboys and miners moved along the wooden sidewalks, and Rose felt exposed, visible, terrified. "Miss, you got someone meeting you?" the driver asked, his weathered face concerned as he handed down her single bag. "No," Rose admitted, forcing herself to stand straighter despite her exhaustion. "I'm looking for work. Is there a boarding house?" "Mrs. Chen runs a respectable place 2 streets over," he said, pointing. "Tell her Frank sent you. She might know of work, too." Rose thanked him and started walking, her boots clicking on the wooden planks. She had traveled by train to Sacramento, then by stagecoach through the Sierra Nevada mountains, each mile putting distance between herself and Marcus Whitmore. But distance had never stopped him before. When she had tried to end things the first time, he had followed her to her sister's home in Milwaukee. When she had hidden at her aunt's boarding house in St. Louis, he had appeared at the door within a week, all apologies and roses, until she made the mistake of believing him again. The third time she tried to leave, he had locked her in his Chicago townhouse for 2 days, and when she finally escaped through a second-story window, he had screamed after her that he would find her wherever she went, that she belonged to him, that death was the only way she would ever be free of him. The cold certainty in his voice had been more terrifying than his fists. Mrs. Chen's boarding house was a tidy 2-story building painted white, with green shutters and a small garden out front that seemed like a miracle in this harsh landscape. A Chinese woman in her 50s answered Rose's knock, her intelligent eyes taking in everything from Rose's expensive but travel-worn dress to the fear Rose could not quite hide. "Frank sent you?" Mrs. Chen asked, her English accented but clear. "Yes, madam. I need a room, and I need work." "You running from someone?" The directness of the question made Rose's throat tighten. "Yes." Mrs. Chen nodded as if this was not unusual. "Husband?" "No, but he wanted to be." "Come in. First week is $3, includes breakfast. I know the bank needs someone to help with correspondence, and the school teacher is looking for an assistant. You read and write?" "Yes, madam. I worked as a secretary in Chicago." "Good. I will take you to the bank manager tomorrow. Tonight you rest. And Miss Parker, Rose Parker." "Miss Parker, Carson City is not so big that a stranger will not be noticed. If your man comes looking, people will see him. We take care of our own here." The kindness in her voice made Rose's eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. She had cried enough over Marcus Whitmore. She would not waste another tear on him. The room Mrs. Chen showed her was small, but spotlessly clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the back garden. Rose set down her bag and sank onto the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. She had done it. She had made it to Nevada, to a place Marcus would never think to look for her. She would find work, build a new life, and maybe eventually stop looking over her shoulder. She was wrong about Marcus never thinking to look for her in Nevada. The next morning, Mrs. Chen accompanied Rose to the First Bank of Carson City, a solid brick building that spoke of permanence and stability. The manager, a portly man named Mr. Hendricks, interviewed Rose in his office and seemed impressed by her penmanship and her references, which he had carefully forged before leaving Chicago. "We need someone to handle correspondence with our clients, maintain ledgers, and help with general office work," he explained. "The salary is $30 a month. Can you start Monday?" Rose agreed gratefully, and when she emerged onto the street with Mrs. Chen, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. The older woman smiled at her and suggested they visit the general store to purchase some practical work clothes. That was when Rose saw him. He was leaning against a post outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, thumbs hooked in his gun belt, and everything about him radiated a kind of quiet competence that made people unconsciously step around him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jawed face that had seen too much sun. His eyes, even from a distance, were a startling blue-gray, and they swept the street with the constant awareness of a man used to watching for trouble. Rose would not have paid him particular attention except that his gaze landed on her for just a moment longer than was polite, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, though she had never seen him before in her life. He straightened slightly, then tipped his hat to her before turning and walking away with a long, easy stride. "That is Logan Irons," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "He's a good man. His ranch is north of town. Lost his family to scarlet fever 5 years ago. Wife and little daughter both." The tragedy in those simple words made Rose's heart ache, but she filed the information away and followed Mrs. Chen into the general store. She purchased 2 simple cotton dresses suitable for office work, new stockings, and a pair of practical boots. The storekeeper, a friendly woman named Mrs. Dalton, chatted about the upcoming Independence Day celebration and invited Rose to attend. "The whole town turns out," Mrs. Dalton said. "There are games, dancing, fireworks. You'll meet everyone properly." Rose smiled and agreed, though the thought of crowds still made her nervous. As they left the store, she caught sight of Logan Irons again. He was across the street, talking to the sheriff, and both men glanced in her direction. Rose felt a prickle of unease. Had she done something wrong? Were they suspicious of her? "Mrs.?" Chen followed her gaze. "Do not worry. Sheriff Morrison is Logan's friend. They fought together against the Comanche Raiders back in '73. Logan just watches out for people, especially women on their own." The explanation should have been reassuring, but Rose had learned not to trust protective men. They always wanted something in return. She started work at the bank on Monday, and the days fell into a comforting routine. She arrived at 8, worked until 5, and returned to Mrs. Chen's boarding house for dinner. The work was not difficult, and Mr. Hendricks was a patient employer who seemed pleased with her efficiency. The other bank employees, 2 tellers named David and Samuel, were friendly but respectful, and Rose began to relax into her new life. She saw Logan Irons several times over the next 2 weeks, always from a distance. He came into town every few days, presumably for supplies or business, and their paths would cross on the street or in the general store. He always tipped his hat to her, and once, when she was carrying a heavy package of ledgers back to the bank, he appeared at her elbow and took them from her without a word, carrying them to the bank door before handing them back and walking away. "Thank you," she called after him, confused by the gesture. He glanced back, and for the first time she saw him almost smile. "Madam." Rose found herself thinking about him more than was probably wise. There was something about the quiet sadness in his eyes that called to her own pain. But she had not come west to find another man. She had come to be free. The Independence Day celebration arrived with perfect summer weather. The town had strung bunting and flags along the main street, and vendors had set up booths selling food and games. Rose wore one of her new dresses, a pale blue cotton that made her feel almost pretty, and walked to the town square with 2 other boarders from Mrs. Chen's establishment, a young married couple named Emily and Thomas, who worked at the assay office. The crowd was enormous, easily 200 people, and Rose felt her old panic rising. Too many faces to watch, too many places for someone to hide. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to remember that Marcus was in Chicago, that he had no way of knowing where she had gone. "Rose!" Mrs. Dalton waved from a booth selling lemonade. "Cole, come meet my husband." Rose allowed herself to be pulled into conversations, introduced to what felt like half the town. Everyone was friendly, curious about the new arrival from Chicago, and she deflected personal questions with practiced ease. Yes, she was enjoying Carson City. No, she had no family to speak of. Yes, the weather was remarkably dry compared to Illinois. She was accepting a glass of lemonade when she felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd, and her heart stopped. Marcus was standing at the edge of the square, partially hidden by a wagon, but she would have recognized him anywhere. He was dressed like a traveler, dusty and road-worn, and his dark eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her blood turn to ice. He was thinner than she remembered, his handsome face harder, and when their eyes met, he smiled. It was not a kind smile. The glass slipped from Rose's nerveless fingers and shattered on the ground. People turned to look, concerned, and Rose backed away, unable to breathe, unable to think. He had found her. He had followed her 2,000 miles, and he had found her. "Miss Parker?" Mrs. Dalton was touching her arm, worried. "Are you unwell?" "I need to go," Rose whispered. "I need to leave." She turned and pushed through the crowd, desperate to get away, to get somewhere safe, though nowhere was safe if Marcus had found her. She stumbled off the main street into a quieter area, her breath coming in gasps, and that was when strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her. "Easy now," a deep voice said. "Easy." Rose looked up into Logan Irons' concerned face. He had appeared out of nowhere, and his hands were gentle but firm on her arms, keeping her from collapsing. "He's here," she managed to say. "He found me." Logan's expression went very still. "Who found you?" "Marcus, my ex-fiancé. He's here. He followed me." Logan's eyes swept the street behind her, then came back to her face. "Describe him." "Tall, dark hair, dark eyes, wearing a brown coat. He was by the wagon at the edge of the square." "Stay here." Logan's voice had gone hard, and he released her and moved back toward the celebration with purposeful strides. Rose leaned against the wall of the building behind her, her whole body shaking. She should run. She should get her things and catch the next stagecoach out of town. But where would she go? How far would she have to run? Logan returned a few minutes later, his face grim. "I do not see anyone matching that description now, but I believe you. Come on." He took her elbow and guided her away from the celebration, down a side street toward a small office with a sheriff's star hanging beside the door. Sheriff Morrison looked up from his desk as they entered, his weathered face immediately serious. "Logan, Miss Parker, what is wrong?" "Miss Parker is being followed by someone who means her harm," Logan said. "He's here in Carson City." The sheriff stood, and Rose found herself recounting the whole story, every shameful detail. The courtship that had turned possessive, the engagement she could not escape, the escalating violence, the final threat, her flight west. Both men listened without interruption, and when she finished, she felt hollow, exposed. "He swore he would kill me if I ever left him for good," she whispered. "And I did. I left Chicago and came here, and now he's found me." "What is his name?" Sheriff Morrison asked, reaching for pen and paper. "Marcus Whitmore. He's a lawyer in Chicago, well-connected, well-respected. No one believed me when I tried to tell them what he was really like." The sheriff and Logan exchanged a look that Rose could not interpret. "Miss Parker," the sheriff said carefully, "you are safe here. This is my jurisdiction, and I do not care what he is in Chicago. If he threatens you or tries to harm you, he will answer to me. Do you understand?" Rose nodded, wanting desperately to believe him. "I am going to make some inquiries," the sheriff continued. "See if anyone saw him arrive, where he might be staying. Logan, can you—" "I will see her home," Logan said immediately, "and I will make sure someone keeps an eye on Mrs. Chen's place tonight." That is not necessary, Rose protested, though the offer made her want to cry with relief. I cannot ask you to. You are not asking, Logan said quietly, and this is what we do here, Miss Parker. We look after each other. He escorted her back to the boarding house, and Rose was aware of his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, guiding her through the now thinning crowd. People called greetings to Logan, and he responded with nods but did not stop walking. When they reached Mrs. Chen's front door, he finally spoke again. I am going to be honest with you, Miss Parker. A man who would follow you this far is not going to give up easily, but he is also not going to get what he wants. I give you my word on that. Why? Rose asked, the question bursting out of her. Why do you care what happens to me? You do not even know me. Logan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. I know what it is like to lose someone you should have protected. I will not let it happen again if I can prevent it. The pain in his voice was so raw that Rose reached out without thinking and touched his hand. Mrs. Chen told me about your wife and daughter. I am so sorry. His jaw tightened. That was different. Sickness, not violence, but the outcome is the same. They are gone, and I was not able to save them. You are here, and you are alive. And as long as I have anything to say about it, that is how you will stay. He tipped his hat and left before Rose could respond. She watched him walk away. This quiet, grieving cowboy who had appointed himself her protector, and felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, not yet, but something warmer than gratitude. Mrs. Chen was waiting inside, and Rose told her everything. The older woman listened, her face grave, and then made Rose a cup of tea with honey and sat with her until the shaking stopped. Logan Irons is a good man, Mrs. Chen said. If he said he will help you, he will. And the sheriff will not let anything happen to you either. But you need to be careful, Rose. No going anywhere alone until this man is dealt with. Rose agreed, though the thought of being a prisoner again, even for her own safety, made her feel sick. She did not sleep that night. Every sound made her jump, and she kept imagining Marcus breaking down her door, finishing what he had started. When dawn finally came, she was exhausted but relieved to have survived the night. She went to work as usual, though Mr. Hendricks had clearly heard what happened because he greeted her with unusual gentleness and told her she could leave early if she needed to. Rose threw herself into her work, grateful for the distraction of ledgers and correspondence. At noon, Logan Irons walked into the bank. He was carrying his hat in his hands, and he waited patiently while Rose finished helping a customer before approaching her desk. Miss Parker, I wondered if I might buy you lunch at the hotel restaurant. The invitation was so unexpected that Rose simply stared at him for a moment. Yes, thank you. Mr. Hendricks waved her off, and Rose collected her shawl and followed Logan out into the bright midday sun. The hotel restaurant was a respectable establishment, and Logan chose a table near the window where he could watch the street. He ordered roast beef sandwiches for both of them and coffee, and then leaned back in his chair studying her. Did you sleep? He asked. No, Rose admitted. Neither did I. I had my foreman, Pete, watching your boarding house last night. Marcus Whitmore did not show up, but that does not mean he was not watching from a distance. Your foreman? You should not be taking your men away from their work because of me. My ranch can spare a man for a few nights, Logan said, and Pete is good with a gun, better than most. The food arrived, and they ate in silence for a few minutes. Rose found that she was hungrier than she had realized, and the meal was delicious, simple, and hearty. Sheriff Morrison sent a telegram to Chicago, Logan said eventually, to confirm Marcus Whitmore's identity and see if there are any warrants out for him. If we are lucky, he will have gotten himself in trouble there, and the sheriff can have him arrested. He's too smart for that, Rose said bitterly. Everyone in Chicago thinks he is wonderful, charming, successful, generous. They think I was crazy to break our engagement. Then they are fools. The flat certainty in Logan's voice made Rose look up. He was watching her with those steady blue-gray eyes, and there was no pity in them, only belief. You do not know me, Rose said. You do not know that I am not exactly what he says I am. difficult, hysterical, ungrateful. I know that you ran 2,000 miles to get away from him, Logan said. That is not the action of someone who is difficult. That is the action of someone who is terrified and brave. Brave. No one had ever called her brave before. Tell me about your ranch, Rose said, desperate to change the subject before she started crying in the middle of the restaurant. Logan allowed the shift in conversation. I have 160 acres north of town, good water, good grazing. I run about 200 head of cattle, and I have 3 men who work for me full time. It is not a big operation, but it is mine, paid for free and clear. How long have you had it? 8 years. My wife and I bought it when we first married. She was from California, came to Nevada with her family during the Silver Rush. We met at a dance, and I knew within 5 minutes I was going to marry her. The fondness in his voice was clear, and Rose felt a pang of envy for the woman who had been so loved. What was her name? Clara. And our daughter was Lucy. She was 3 when they died. Logan's hands tightened around his coffee cup. I was in Virginia City buying supplies. When I got home, they were both burning with fever. Doctor said there was nothing to be done. They were gone within 2 days. I am so sorry, Rose whispered. It was 5 years ago. The grief does not go away, but you learn to carry it. He looked at her directly. Just like you will learn to stop looking over your shoulder eventually, but first we have to make sure Marcus Whitmore understands that you are under protection here and that he needs to leave Carson City. He will not care about protection, Rose said. He thinks I belong to him. Nothing else matters to him. Then we will have to convince him otherwise. They finished their meal, and Logan walked Rose back to the bank. As they approached, Rose saw a man standing across the street watching the building. Her heart lurched, but it was not Marcus. This man was older, stockier, with a badge pinned to his vest. That is Deputy Harris, Logan said quietly. The sheriff has him watching the bank during the day. This is too much, Rose protested. I cannot have the whole town rearranging their lives because of me. You are not asking us to. We are choosing to. There is a difference. Logan touched the brim of his hat. I will see you this evening, Miss Parker. Rose, she said impulsively. Please call me Rose. Something warm flickered in his eyes. Rose, and you should call me Logan. He left, and Rose returned to her desk, acutely aware of the deputy across the street and the way other people in the bank kept glancing at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. She hated being the object of such attention, but she also felt safer than she had in years. The afternoon passed slowly. At 5 o'clock, Logan appeared again to walk her home, and Rose did not protest. They talked about inconsequential things. The weather, the upcoming cattle drive Logan was planning, Rose's work at the bank. It felt surprisingly normal, and Rose realized she was enjoying his company in a way she had not expected. When they reached Mrs. Chen's, Logan said, I would like to take you to dinner tomorrow evening if you are willing. The hotel serves a good steak on Wednesdays. Rose hesitated. She had sworn she would not let another man into her life, not after Marcus. But Logan was nothing like Marcus. He had not tried to control her, had not demanded anything from her. He had simply offered protection, and now, companionship. I would like that, she said. His smile was small but genuine. Good. I will collect you at 6. That night, Rose slept a little better, knowing Pete was watching the house. She dreamed of blue-gray eyes and steady hands, and for once the dreams were not nightmares. The next day passed without incident, though Rose noticed Deputy Harris still stationed across from the bank and Logan riding past several times, always tipping his hat to her. At 5:30 she returned to the boarding house and changed into her better dress, a deep green silk she had brought from Chicago. Mrs. Chen helped her pin up her hair, and when Rose looked in the mirror she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked almost happy. Logan arrived promptly at 6, dressed in clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his dark hair still damp from washing. He offered his arm, and Rose took it, allowing him to escort her down the street to the hotel. The restaurant was busier tonight, and several people called greetings to Logan as they entered. He led Rose to a quiet table in the corner and pulled out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. The meal was excellent, and the conversation flowed more easily than Rose had expected. Logan was intelligent and well-read, surprising her with his knowledge of literature and current events. He asked about her life in Chicago, and Rose found herself telling him about her childhood, her parents who had died of influenza when she was 17, her sister who had married and moved to Boston. "That is how I met Marcus," she admitted. "I was working as a secretary for a legal firm, and he was a junior partner. He was so attentive, so charming. I thought I was lucky." "When did it change?" "After we were engaged. Suddenly, he did not want me working. He did not want me seeing my friends. He needed to know where I was every moment of the day." Rose stared at her plate. "And when I tried to talk to him about it, he would get angry. At first, it was just yelling. Then he started grabbing me, shaking me, then worse." Logan's jaw was tight. "Did you go to the police?" "Yes. They said it was a domestic matter. The magistrate told me that perhaps I should try being more accommodating to my fiancé's wishes." "That is horse shit," Logan said bluntly, and Rose could not help laughing at his vehemence. "Yes, it is, but that is how the world works for women like me. We are supposed to smile and endure." She met his eyes. "But I could not. I could not marry him knowing what he was capable of, so I ran." "You did the right thing." "Did I?" "He is here now, and I am putting everyone in danger." "No," Logan said firmly. "He is the one putting people in danger. You're just trying to survive. There's a difference, Rose." They finished their dinner, and Logan ordered coffee and apple pie for dessert. Rose was relaxed for the first time in months, enjoying the simple pleasure of good food and better company. Logan told her about his ranch, about the satisfaction of building something with your own hands, about the peace of watching the sun set over the mountains. "Would you like to see it sometime, Ki Suwa?" he asked. "The ranch, I mean. I could drive you out on Sunday if you're willing. Mrs. Chen could come as chaperone if that would make you more comfortable." "I would like that very much," Rose said. They left the restaurant as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Logan offered his arm again, and Rose took it, feeling something dangerously close to contentment. They were halfway to the boarding house when Rose saw him. Marcus stepped out of the shadows between two buildings directly into their path. He looked even worse than he had at the celebration, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes wild. But he was smiling that terrible smile, and Rose's whole body went rigid with terror. "There you are, darling," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false affection. "I have been looking everywhere for you." Logan stepped in front of Rose, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. "Back away." Marcus's eyes shifted to Logan, and his smile widened. "And who might you be? Rose's new protector? How long before you realize what she really is? A lying, manipulative little witch who will—" "I said back away," Logan repeated, his voice deadly quiet. "I will not say it again." "This is none of your concern, Cowboy. Rose and I have unfinished business." "Rose is under my protection, and you are not welcome here. Leave Carson City tonight, or you will be arrested." Marcus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Arrested for what? Trying to speak to my fiancé?" "Former fiancé," Rose said, finding her voice despite her terror. "I ended our engagement months ago, Marcus. I do not want to see you. I do not want to speak to you. Please, just leave me alone." "You do not get to decide that," Marcus said, taking a step forward. "You belong to me, Rose. You have always belonged to me." Logan moved faster than Rose would have thought possible. He grabbed Marcus by the front of his coat and slammed him against the wall of the building with enough force to knock the breath out of him. "Listen very carefully," Logan said, his face inches from Marcus's. "Rose does not belong to you. She does not belong to anyone. And if you come near her again, if you so much as look at her, I will make you regret it. Do you understand me?" Marcus struggled, but Logan's grip was iron. "You are making a mistake. She is mine." "No," Logan said, "she is not. And you are leaving. Now." He released Marcus and stepped back, his hand still resting on his gun. Marcus straightened his coat, his face twisted with rage, but he took a step backward, then another. "This is not over, Rose," he called. "I will never let you go." "Then you will die trying," Logan said flatly, "because I promise you, if you hurt her, I will kill you myself. Now get out of my sight." Marcus stared at them for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the gathering darkness. Rose was shaking so hard she could barely stand, and Logan turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" Rose nodded, unable to speak. Logan put his arm around her shoulders and guided her the rest of the way to the boarding house. Mrs. Chen took one look at Rose's face and ushered them inside, sitting Rose down in the parlor and pouring her a generous measure of brandy. "What happened?" the older woman demanded. Logan explained while Rose sipped the brandy, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. When he finished, Mrs. Chen nodded grimly. "I will send for Sheriff Morrison. He needs to know about this confrontation." The sheriff arrived within 20 minutes, and Rose had to recount the entire encounter. Sheriff Morrison's face grew grimmer with every word. "I am going to find him and give him a choice, the sheriff said. "He can leave Carson City voluntarily, or I can hold him in my jail on suspicion of making threats. Either way, he is not going to be wandering around my town harassing women." "Thank you, Sheriff," Rose whispered. After the sheriff left, Logan stayed for another hour, sitting with Rose and Mrs. Chen in the parlor until Rose's shaking finally stopped. When he stood to leave, Rose walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said. "For everything, for protecting me." "You do not need to thank me," Logan said. "I meant what I told him, Rose. I will not let him hurt you." "But what if he hurts you?" "Marcus is dangerous, Logan. He does not care about consequences when he is angry." Logan's smile was grim. "Neither do I." He left, and Rose went to bed, exhausted, but somehow still unable to sleep. She kept replaying the confrontation in her mind, the way Logan had moved to protect her without hesitation, the way he had looked at Marcus with such cold certainty. No one had ever stood up for her like that. No one had ever believed her enough to risk themselves. The next morning, Sheriff Morrison came to the boarding house with news. Marcus had checked into the Carson City hotel under a false name, but when the sheriff went to find him, he was gone. His room had been paid for through the end of the week, but his bags were missing. "I think your friend convinced him to leave," the sheriff said, "but I have no way of knowing if he actually left town or just moved somewhere less obvious. I have sent telegrams to the surrounding towns asking them to watch for him." Rose felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Marcus had not left. She knew him too well. He was just regrouping, planning his next move. Logan came by the bank at noon and took Rose to lunch again. She told him about the sheriff's news, and Logan's expression grew thoughtful. "If he is still here, he is being careful not to be seen. That gives us an advantage. He cannot act openly without the sheriff arresting him." "So what do I do? Just wait for him to make his next move?" "No. You live your life. You go to work. You see your friends. And you do not let him control you with fear." Logan reached across the table and took her hand. "I know that is easier said than done, Rose, but if you hide, you have already let him win." Rose looked down at their joined hands. Logan's palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid, and she realized she liked the feeling of his hand holding hers. "Will you still take me to your ranch on Sunday?" she asked. "If you still want to go, absolutely." "I do. I want to see what you built." That Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect summer day that made the harshness of the Nevada landscape seem almost inviting. Logan arrived at Mrs. Chen's in a buckboard wagon, and true to his word, he had invited Mrs. Chen to accompany them as chaperone. The older woman had packed a picnic lunch, and the three of them set out north from Carson City, following a well-worn road that climbed gradually into the foothills. Logan's ranch appeared after about 40 minutes of travel, and Rose caught her breath at the sight of it. The land rolled gently, dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers, and a clear stream ran through the heart of the property. The house was modest but well built, a sturdy log structure with a wide front porch and a stone chimney. Nearby were a barn, a corral with several horses, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. "It is beautiful," Rose said, and meant it. Logan helped them down from the wagon, and Pete, the foreman Rose had heard about, came out to greet them. He was a lanky man in his 30s with a weathered face and kind eyes. Two other ranch hands, introduced as Joe and Sammy, waved from the corral where they were working with a young horse. Logan showed them around with obvious pride, pointing out the improvements he had made, the plans he had for expanding the herd. The house was neat and spare inside, with well-made furniture and a few personal touches that spoke of the family that had once lived there. A child's drawing, faded and framed, hung on the wall near the fireplace, and Rose felt her heart ache for the little girl who had created it. They ate lunch on the porch, watching the horses graze in the distance. Mrs. Chen and Pete struck up a lively conversation about the best way to make dumplings, leaving Rose and Logan to talk quietly on the other end of the porch. "This is a good life you have built here," Rose said. "It is a quiet life," Logan said. "Some people would find it boring." "I think I would find it peaceful." Rose surprised herself with the honesty of the statement. She had always imagined herself in a city surrounded by culture and society, but sitting here in the clear mountain air, watching the land stretch out in all directions, she felt something settle in her soul. "Would you ever want to live on a ranch?" Logan asked, and there was something careful in his voice, as if the answer mattered more than he wanted to admit. Rose met his eyes. "I think I could be happy here, if I were with the right person." Logan's hand moved slowly across the space between them and covered hers. "Rose, I need to tell you something. I know we have only known each other for a few weeks, and I know you're dealing with a lot right now, but I need you to know that I care about you, more than I have cared about anyone since Clara died." Rose's breath caught. "Logan, I am not asking you for anything," he continued. "I am not trying to pressure you, but I wanted you to know, and when all of this business with Marcus Whitmore is settled, when you feel safe again, I would like the chance to court you properly, if you are willing." Rose felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of something that felt dangerously like joy. "I would like that too," she whispered. Logan smiled, really smiled, and Rose realized it transformed his whole face. He was not just handsome in that moment. He was beautiful. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the ranch, and Rose felt herself relaxing in a way she had not since before she met Marcus. Logan taught her to feed the horses, and she laughed at the way they lipped at her palms, searching for treats. Mrs. Chen and Pete became fast friends, and by the time they loaded back into the buckboard for the return trip, Rose felt like she had found something precious, something worth protecting. They were halfway back to town when Logan suddenly tensed, his eyes fixed on something ahead. Rose followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. A man on horseback was blocking the road. Even at a distance, Rose recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he sat in the saddle. Marcus. Logan pulled the wagon to a halt and handed the reins to Mrs. Chen. "Stay here," he said quietly, then climbed down and walked forward, his hand resting casually on his gun. Rose could not hear what they were saying, but she could see Marcus gesturing angrily, his face flushed with rage. Logan stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but ready. The confrontation lasted less than a minute before Marcus wheeled his horse around and galloped away, disappearing in a cloud of dust. Logan returned to the wagon, his face grim. "He is not leaving. He said he would burn down my ranch before he let another man have you." Rose felt sick. "This is my fault. I should never have come here. I am putting all of you in danger." "Stop that," Logan said firmly. "This is not your fault. Marcus Whitmore is a criminal, and he will be dealt with as such. But I am taking you straight to the sheriff. This has gone far enough." At the sheriff's office, Marcus's threat was taken seriously. Sheriff Morrison organized a patrol to search for Marcus, and he sent word to Logan's ranch to be on alert. Logan insisted on staying in town that night, taking a room at the hotel so he could keep watch over the boarding house. "I do not like this," Rose said as Logan walked her to her door. "I hate that I have disrupted your life, that I have put your ranch in danger." "My ranch is in danger because Marcus Whitmore is an obsessed madman, not because of anything you did," Logan said. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Rose, listen to me. You are not responsible for his actions. You are only responsible for your own choices, and every choice you have made has been brave and right. Do you understand?" Rose nodded, and before she could second-guess herself, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was a brief, chaste kiss, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Logan's arms came around her, holding her carefully, as if she were something precious and fragile. "I am falling in love with you," she whispered against his lips. "I did not mean to, but I am." "Good," Logan said, his voice rough with emotion, "because I have already fallen." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other on Mrs. Chen's front porch, and Rose felt something she had not felt in years: hope. The next week passed in a strange state of tension. Marcus was not found despite the sheriff's patrols, and Rose began to wonder if he had finally given up and left. But Logan did not think so, and neither did Sheriff Morrison. They both believed Marcus was biding his time, waiting for his chance. Logan came to town every day, walking Rose to and from work, taking her to dinner, spending every spare moment with her. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Rose told Logan about the guilt she carried for not leaving Marcus sooner, and Logan told her about the nightmares he still had where he came home to find Clara and Lucy burning with fever. "I keep thinking there must have been something I could have done," Logan admitted one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. "Some way I could have saved them." "There was not," Rose said gently. "You loved them, Logan. You gave them a good life and a good home. That is all anyone can do." Logan pulled her close, and Rose rested her head on his shoulder, feeling safe in a way she had never expected to feel again. It was 3 weeks after the confrontation on the road when Marcus finally made his move. Rose was closing up the bank with Mr. Hendricks and Samuel, the senior teller. It was later than usual, nearly 7 o'clock, because they had been reconciling some discrepancies in the ledgers. Logan had been called back to his ranch for an emergency. One of his cows had gone into difficult labor, and Pete had sent word that he was needed immediately. Logan had been reluctant to leave Rose, but she had insisted. She would be fine for one evening, and Mr. Hendricks had promised to walk her home. They stepped out into the twilight, and Mr. Hendricks locked the heavy bank door behind them. Samuel bid them good night and headed in the opposite direction toward his own home. Rose and Mr. Hendricks walked slowly down the now quiet main street, discussing the day's work. They were passing the alley beside the general store when Marcus stepped out. He was holding a gun. "Hello, Rose," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I think it is time we finished our conversation." Mr. Hendricks moved to stand in front of Rose, but Marcus swung the gun toward him. "Do not be stupid, old man. This has nothing to do with you. Walk away." "I will not leave Miss Parker," Mr. Hendricks said bravely, though Rose could see him trembling. "Then you will die with her," Marcus said, and Rose saw his finger tighten on the trigger. "No!" Rose screamed, and she grabbed Mr. Hendricks's arm, trying to pull him out of the way. The gun fired with a deafening crack, and Mr. Hendricks cried out, stumbling. Rose caught him as he fell, seeing blood spreading across his shoulder. Marcus advanced, raising the gun again, and Rose knew with terrible certainty that she was going to die. Then another gunshot split the air, and Marcus jerked backward, the gun falling from his hand. He looked down at the red stains spreading across his chest, his face registering shock and confusion. Sheriff Morrison stepped out from behind the corner of the building, his own gun smoking. "Drop to your knees, Whitmore, now." Marcus swayed, then collapsed to the ground. The sheriff kept his gun trained on him as he approached, and Deputy Harris appeared from another direction, running toward them. "Get the doctor!" Sheriff Morrison barked. "For both of them!" Rose was shaking so hard she could barely keep hold of Mr. Hendricks, who was conscious but clearly in pain. People were emerging from nearby buildings, drawn by the gunshots, and suddenly Logan was there, pulling Rose to her feet, checking her frantically for injuries. "Are you hurt? Rose, are you hurt?" No, I am fine, but Mr. Hendricks." The doctor arrived and took over, examining Mr. Hendricks's shoulder and pronouncing it a clean wound that would heal well. Marcus was still alive but unconscious, and the doctor worked on him too, though Rose could see the grave expression on his face. Sheriff Morrison pulled Logan and Rose aside. "I had been watching the bank," he explained. "I did not trust that Whitmore had left town, so I have been keeping an eye on places he might try something. I heard the first shot and got here as fast as I could. I am sorry I could not prevent him from shooting Hendricks." "You saved our lives," Rose said, her voice shaking. "Thank you, Sheriff." Marcus died an hour later, never regaining consciousness. Rose felt nothing when the doctor delivered the news, just a numb sort of relief. It was over. Finally, it was over. Logan took Rose back to the boarding house, and Mrs. Chen fussed over her, making hot tea and wrapping her in blankets even though the evening was warm. Rose sat in the parlor staring at nothing, unable to fully process what had happened. "He is gone," she whispered. "Marcus is really gone." Logan sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. "He can never hurt you again." Rose clung to him and finally let herself cry, great shuddering sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Logan held her through all of it, murmuring soothing words, his hand stroking her hair. When the storm finally passed, Rose felt empty but somehow lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you heal," Logan said. "Now you live the life you were meant to live, without fear, without looking over your shoulder." "Will you be part of that life?" Rose asked, pulling back to look at him. Logan's eyes were intense, full of emotion. "If you will have me, I will be whatever you need me to be. Friend, protector, husband, if you will marry me someday." Rose's breath caught. "Are you proposing?" "Not yet," Logan said with a small smile. "I think you need time to grieve and heal before you make any big decisions, but I wanted you to know my intentions. I want to marry you, Rose Parker. I want to build a life with you on my ranch. I want to fill that house with laughter and love and children if we are blessed with them. But I will wait as long as you need me to wait." Rose touched his face, marveling at the tenderness in his eyes. "I do not need as long as you might think. I already know what I want, Logan. I want you. I want the life you described. I want to wake up every morning and know that I am safe and loved." "You are," Logan said fiercely. "You are safe, and you are loved, and you always will be." They sat together on Mrs. Chen's couch until late into the night, making plans for a future that finally felt possible. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Marcus's body was shipped back to Chicago for burial, and Rose had to endure an inquiry into the shooting, though Sheriff Morrison's testimony made it clear that he had acted in defense of Rose and Mr. Hendricks. Mr. Hendricks recovered well from his shoulder wound and insisted on returning to work within 2 weeks, though Rose and the other employees fussed over him constantly. Logan came to town every day, and his courtship of Rose was a topic of much happy gossip in Carson City. He brought her flowers, took her on long walks, and introduced her to his ranch hands as the woman he intended to marry. Rose felt herself healing in the warmth of his affection, the shadows of her past with Marcus gradually fading. 2 months after Marcus's death, Logan proposed properly. He took Rose back to his ranch and led her to a spot by the stream where wildflowers grew in profusion. There, on one knee in the late summer sunshine, he offered her his grandmother's ring and asked her to be his wife. Rose said yes without hesitation. They were married in October in a simple ceremony at the small church in Carson City. Mrs. Chen stood up as Rose's matron of honor, and Pete served as Logan's best man. The whole town turned out for the celebration. and Rose was overwhelmed by the genuine affection and acceptance she felt from her new community. These people had protected her when she needed it most. They had become her family. The wedding night was gentle and sweet, Logan taking his time to show Rose that intimacy could be tender and beautiful, not frightening and painful. He was patient with her nervousness, whispering words of love and reassurance, and by the time the sun rose the next morning, Rose felt like she had finally truly escaped her past. Life on the ranch was everything Rose had hoped it would be. She threw herself into learning how to manage a household on the frontier, how to can and preserve food, how to help with the animals. Logan taught her to ride, and she discovered a love of galloping across the open land with the wind in her hair. The ranch hands accepted her as Logan's wife and their employer, treating her with respect and affection. Mrs. Chen visited often, and Rose made other friends among the ranchers' wives in the area. She hosted dinner parties and helped with barn raisings and quilting bees, becoming part of the fabric of rural Nevada life. The loneliness she had felt in Chicago, where she had been isolated and controlled, was replaced by a sense of belonging she had never known before. In the spring of 1879, Rose discovered she was pregnant. Logan was overjoyed, though also terrified, the memory of losing Clara and Lucy still fresh enough to haunt him. But Rose's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and on a cold January morning in 1880, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Logan's father, and Logan wept as he held his son for the first time. "I never thought I would have this again," he whispered, staring down at the tiny, perfect face. "I thought that part of my life was over." "It is just beginning," Rose said, exhausted but radiant. "We are just beginning, Logan." Thomas was followed by 2 more children over the next 5 years, a daughter they named Clara after Logan's first wife, and another son they called James. The house that had been so quiet and sad when Rose first saw it was now filled with noise and laughter, with toys scattered across the floor and children's voices echoing off the walls. Rose never forgot what she had survived, but the memories lost their power to hurt her. She had nightmares sometimes, dreams where Marcus was chasing her and she could not run fast enough, but Logan would wake her gently and hold her until the fear passed. She learned to recognize the anniversary of Marcus's death as a day to be grateful for her survival, not a day to mourn. She and Logan built a partnership based on mutual respect and deep love. They worked the ranch together, made decisions together, raised their children together. Logan never tried to control her or diminish her, and Rose never took for granted the gift of a man who saw her as an equal and a partner. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Logan surprised Rose with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time she had left the ranch for more than a day since moving there, and she was nervous about being away from the children, even though Mrs. Chen had agreed to stay with them. But once they arrived in the bustling city, Rose found herself enchanted by the theaters, the restaurants, the sheer energy of urban life. "Do you miss this?" Logan asked one evening as they walked along the waterfront. "The city, the culture?" Rose thought about it seriously before answering. "I miss some things, the museums, the libraries, but I would not trade what we have for anything. Our life on the ranch, our children, our home, that is everything I need, Logan." He smiled and pulled her close. "You are everything I need. You saved me, you know. After Clara and Lucy died, I thought I was just going through the motions of living. But then you came to Carson City, scared and brave and so damn determined to survive. And you reminded me what it felt like to have something worth fighting for." "We saved each other," Rose said, kissing him. "And we will keep saving each other every single day." They returned to the ranch a week later, and Rose scooped her children into her arms, breathing in their familiar scent and marveling at how much they had grown even in such a short time. Thomas was now 10, tall and serious like his father. Clara was 8, spirited and strong-willed, and James was 5, sweet-tempered and gentle. As the years passed, Rose watched her children grow into remarkable young people. Thomas took to ranching like he was born to it, working alongside Logan and eventually becoming a full partner in the operation. Clara surprised everyone by developing a passion for law and justice, inspired by her mother's stories of the sheriff who had protected her. She eventually moved to San Francisco to attend a women's college, determined to become a lawyer herself. James discovered a talent for horse training and built a reputation across Nevada for his gentle, effective methods. Rose herself became known in the area as someone women could turn to if they needed help leaving dangerous situations. She quietly assisted several women over the years, providing money, transportation, or simply a safe place to stay while they figured out their next steps. Logan supported her in this work, understanding better than most the importance of giving people a second chance at life. Mr. Hendricks retired from the bank when he was 70, and at his retirement party he pulled Rose aside and told her that she had been the best employee he had ever had. But more than that, he said, "You were brave. You showed a lot of people in this town that it is possible to start over, to build a new life. That is a rare gift, Mrs. Irons." Rose and Logan grew old together on the ranch they had built. They celebrated the births of grandchildren, mourned the deaths of old friends, and watched Carson City transform from a rough frontier town into a thriving community. Through it all, they remained each other's greatest support and deepest love. On a warm summer evening in 1915, Rose and Logan sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains. They were both in their 60s now, their hair silver, their faces lined with age and experience. Logan's hand found Rose's, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "Do you remember the day we met?" Logan asked. "I remember being terrified," Rose said. "I remember thinking you were just another man who wanted to control me." "And now?" "Now I know you are the man who set me free." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Logan Irons. Thank you for finding me that day in Carson City. Thank you for believing me when no one else did. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." "The pleasure has been entirely mine, Mrs. Irons," Logan said, kissing the top of her head. "Every single day." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear the sounds of their family gathering for dinner, Thomas and his wife, their 3 grandchildren visiting for the summer, and Clara, who had come home for a visit between cases. James would arrive tomorrow with his wife and their new baby. Rose closed her eyes and breathed deeply, savoring the moment. She had survived Marcus Whitmore. She had crossed a continent in search of freedom. She had found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected man. And she had built a life that was rich and full and entirely her own. The past would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was Rose Irons' wife, mother, grandmother, survivor, and fighter. She was loved and cherished and safe. She was free, and that, she thought, was the greatest gift of all. The years continued to unfold with a steady rhythm. Logan and Rose eventually passed the day-to-day running of the ranch to Thomas, though Logan still rode out most mornings to check on the cattle and the land he loved so deeply. Rose spent her time with her grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days and teaching them to read and write, just as she had once dreamed of doing as a school teacher. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1929, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The whole town of Carson City came to the celebration, a testament to the respect and affection the Irons family had earned over the decades. Sheriff Morrison, long retired but still sharp as a tack, gave a toast about the day he had met Rose Parker and how he had known immediately she was someone special. Mrs. Chen, now in her 90s but still formidable, added her own memories of the scared young woman who had arrived at her door all those years ago. Logan stood and offered his own toast, his voice still strong despite his years. 50 years ago, I married the bravest woman I've ever known. Rose came west running from danger, looking for nothing more than survival, but she found a home, a family, and a purpose. She taught me that it is possible to love again after loss, to trust again after betrayal, to build again after everything has been torn down. Every day with her has been a gift, and I thank God for the day she stepped off that stagecoach in Carson City. Rose wiped tears from her eyes as everyone applauded. Later, when the guests had gone home and they were alone in their bedroom, she and Logan held each other close, marveling at the life they had created together. "I was so scared that first day," Rose admitted. "I thought Marcus would find me and kill me and no one would even know I had existed." "Instead, you lived," Logan said. "You lived and loved and raised a family and changed countless lives. That is your legacy, Rose. Not fear, not victimhood, but strength and survival and love." Rose kissed him, and even after 50 years, the touch of his lips still made her heart flutter. "Our legacy," she corrected. "We built this together, Logan. Every bit of it." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had done thousands of times before. Two people who had found each other against all odds and had chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Logan passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1932 at the age of 78. Rose was holding his hand when he drew his last breath, and though her heart broke at the loss, she also felt a deep sense of gratitude for the years they had shared. He had been her protector, her partner, her greatest love, and she would carry him in her heart until her own final day. She lived another 5 years, spending them with her children and grandchildren, continuing her quiet work of helping women in need and tending the ranch that Logan had built with his own hands. On the morning of her death in 1937, she sat on the porch one last time, watching the sunrise over the mountains, and she smiled. She had come west running for her life, and she had found so much more than survival. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. And as she closed her eyes for the final time, Rose Parker Irons had no regrets, only gratitude for a life well lived and a love that had changed everything. Her children buried her next to Logan on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Rose Parker Irons, 1856-1937, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She came west looking for freedom and found love." And on quiet summer evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered on the porch of the old ranch house, they still told the story of Rose and Logan. They told of a young woman who had been brave enough to run, and a cowboy who had been strong enough to stand between her and danger. They told of a love that had healed old wounds and created new possibilities. They told of a partnership that had built something lasting and beautiful in the harsh Nevada wilderness. And in the telling, Rose and Logan lived on. Their legacy not just in the thriving ranch or the large family that bore their name, but in the example they had set of courage, resilience, and the transformative power of love. The story became part of Carson City's history, passed down through generations as a reminder that it is never too late to start over, never too late to find happiness, and never too late to build a life worth living. The ranch itself remained in the family for over a century, each generation adding their own stories and contributions while honoring the foundation that Rose and Logan had laid. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original structure that Logan had built remained at its heart, a testament to his craftsmanship and love. The stream still ran clear and cold through the property, and the wildflowers still bloomed in profusion each spring, just as they had on the day Logan proposed to Rose. Thomas's descendants continued to work the land, adapting to changing times while maintaining the values of hard work, integrity, and compassion that Rose and Logan had instilled. Clara's passion for justice inspired 3 generations of lawyers and advocates who fought for the vulnerable and voiceless. James's gift with horses became a family business that supplied working animals to ranches across Nevada and beyond. But more than the tangible legacy of land and livelihood, Rose and Logan left behind something more precious: the knowledge that love can heal, that courage can overcome fear, and that it is possible to transform tragedy into triumph. Their story was proof that the choices we make in our darkest moments can lead to our brightest futures, and that sometimes the very thing we are running from leads us exactly where we need to be. In the end, Rose Parker had come west to escape death. Instead, she had found life in its fullest, richest form. She had found a man who saw her strength when she felt weak, who believed in her when she doubted herself, and who loved her not in spite of her past but with full understanding of what she had survived. Logan Irons had given her safety, respect, and a partnership of equals. But more than that, he had given her the space to heal, to grow, and to become the woman she was always meant to be. And Rose had given Logan something equally precious. She had reminded him that life after loss was not just possible, but beautiful. She had filled his empty house with love and laughter. She had shown him that his capacity for protection and care, which he thought had died with Clara and Lucy, was not gone, but simply waiting for the right person to cherish. She had made him whole again. Theirs was not a perfect love story because no real love story ever is. They had arguments and disagreements, hard times and setbacks. There were years when the ranch struggled financially, seasons when illness swept through the family, moments when old fears and griefs resurfaced. But through it all, they faced everything together, side by side, drawing strength from each other and from the commitment they had made. The love that grew between the scared young woman from Chicago and the grieving cowboy from Nevada was not the desperate, consuming passion of youth, but something deeper and more enduring. It was a love built on mutual respect, shared values, and daily choice. It was a love that matured and deepened with each passing year, that weathered storms and celebrated joys, that created a legacy far beyond what either of them could have imagined that first day in Carson City. And so the story of Rose and Logan became more than just their own. It became a story about second chances, about the courage to start over, about the power of community to protect its own. It became a story about justice served and evil defeated, about good people standing up for what was right. Most of all, it became a story about love's ability to heal even the deepest wounds and transform even the most difficult past into a foundation for a beautiful future. As the decades passed and the 20th century gave way to the 21st, the details of Rose and Logan's story were sometimes embellished or forgotten, but the essence remained. In Carson City, they were remembered as pioneers who had helped build a community on principles of justice and compassion. On the ranch, they were honored as the founders of a family tradition of integrity and hard work. And in the hearts of their descendants, they lived on as proof that true love exists, that it is worth fighting for, and that it has the power to change everything. The wildflowers still bloom on the hillside where Rose and Logan are buried, tended by family members who make the pilgrimage each year. The stream still runs clear and cold. The mountains still stand eternal against the Nevada sky. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispers through the pines, some say you can still hear echoes of laughter from the old ranch house, of children playing, of two people who loved each other deeply and built something that would last forever. Rose Parker Irons came west running for her life. She found Logan Irons, who made sure danger never reached her. Together they created a love story that proved some things are worth fighting for, some bonds are unbreakable, and some loves are truly forever. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all. Not just survival, but flourishing. Not just escaping darkness, but building light. Not just finding safety, but creating a home filled with love that would echo through generations. Their story ended not with tragedy, but with triumph. Not with fear, but with fulfillment. Not with an ending, but with a legacy that would continue as long as there were people to remember that once, in the wild west of Nevada, a woman in need of protection met a man capable of providing it, and together they proved that love can conquer all.